Very good evening and thank you for joining us. This is Live with Faye on YouTube for our audience who's tuned in, who's coming and walking in right now. Thank you for giving us your time and your attention every evening at 8 p.m. We appreciate your time and we don't take it for granted. Every evening we have a conversation about a topic that we believe is of national importance. Today we're going to talk about the UP Cabinet approving a new draft ordinance. Before we begin, I want to apologize to my viewers for using the term love jihad, which I know many people find hurtful. Unfortunately, there is no other way to communicate what is happening in the country right now other than to use this term. I wish I could use air quotes every time I said it on the show, but I expect that we're going to say it an awful lot over the next 1 hour or so. We'll try and take as many questions as we can. We also have an excellent team of very senior lawyers and journalists to help us understand what is going on. To give you a brief of what we're talking about, just last night, the Uttar Pradesh cabinet cleared a draft ordinance against what it calls forceful interfaith conversion, or the so-called love jihad. Now, what it does basically is it's effectively an anti-conversion law because it doesn't specify any one religion. It talks about using marriage to it talks about using marriage to convert people. And we know that this is something that the UP Chief Minister, Mr. Adityanath, has used in his campaigns many, many times. Just quickly take you through what the law says. If there is conversion of a forced kind or by coercion through marriage, there will be a jail term of up to 5 years and a fine of 15,000. If the girl in question is a minor or the woman in question is of the SC and ST castes, then the fine is 25,000 and the jail term is 10 years. If there is a mass conversion, then the organizers could face 10 years in jail and a 50,000 rupee fine. And if it is discovered that the marriage was conducted purely for the purpose of conversion, then the marriage will be annulled, or it will be called shunya, which is null and void. Also, it basically gives discretionary powers to the district magistrate who will approve every conversion. So anyone who wants to convert, has to approach the district magistrate 2 months in advance and seek permission in order to do so. One will assume that these district magistrates will receive adequate instructions on what to approve and what not to approve. It doesn't say so in the law. We have a stellar panel, guys. I'm really excited, so I'm going to get straight to it. Mr. Aryama Sundaram and Mr. Kailash Vasdev are senior lawyers. I beg your pardon. Mr. Aryama Sundaram and Kailash Vasdev are senior advocates of the Supreme Court. Ms. Geeta Luthra will join us as well. She's also a senior advocate. And Mr. Sharat Pradhan, a very senior journalist, joining us out of Luthra. You know, I do not have conversations about Uttar Pradesh without including Mr. Pradhan. This is how well
it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure to be
the state. I thank all of you for joining us. Let me get straight to it. Mr. Sundaram, how do you interpret this law? Because the last time we talked, and every lawyer I have spoken to so far says this is completely untenable, and it doesn't in any way, it's impossible to reconcile it with our fundamental, the rights in our country that our country gives us. As an anti-conversion law, does it make more sense right now in the form that we've seen?
I think, Faye, before we go any further, let's just understand what is being done, what this law is all about. You see, till now, it has been common often to convert for the purpose of marriage. The two ways it was done. One, you converted because people of a certain religious faith believe that a marriage would not be valid unless the spouse also converted to theirs. So it is a matter of a willing conversion, which was done. Whether you converted, of course, Hinduism never understood the concept of conversion because it wasn't part of our religion, but nonetheless, it was something that was done. So you had a Svetlana becoming Sita Devi, or you had, whatever was done for the purpose of the marriage. The other reason it was done, and this I talked to you as a lawyer from the south of India, where often people would convert for the purpose of getting married a second time, go through a bigamous marriage, which would be bigamous by their religion. but they converted to another religion so that that religion permitted more than one wife, and therefore they could go through a second marriage. And that's why the Madras High Court, which had occasion to deal with such marriages, said the question is whether the person is really living that way of life, is living that religion. Question is not whether Sundareshan became Sultan overnight. The question is whether he lives the life that Sultan would normally have lived. Now, these were the two ways that we had the conversions earlier. What this enactment is really doing is, indirectly, whether we want to face it or not, is really something to prevent conversions. And let me explain why. Now, you talk about a forceful conversion. You don't need this act to make a forceful conversion an illegality or an offense, because if you do it forcefully, it, by the face of it, becomes an offense. Equally, the question of converting a minor girl into a marriage. Now, that itself, anybody who helps a minor girl get married is themselves participating in an offense.
Right.
So all these areas are already offenses. They're already offenses. What is the new thing here? The new thing here is you've said a person who is marrying somebody for the purpose of converting them. That
Yes.
is to say, that is why you used the expression you didn't want to use, the LJ, let me say, is where it comes in. Is that what you really wanted to say, bring out there is that a person says, now look here, I don't really want to, I'm sorry, is my
Please
interline?
continue. Yes, yes.
What the person wanted to is saying is really not that I want to really marry this lady, but what he's saying is that I want to convert her, ergo I'll go to a form of marriage. Now, what can be the problem there? There really cannot be very much of a problem there, because if that lady afterwards finds that, look here, this man has really made a monkey out of me and he has no desire to really remain married to me, she can always leave him, get divorced, and nobody's forcing her to continue in that same religion. She will
Yes.
then say, I changed my religion just for the same form of marriage. If he has no desire to be married to me, then let me go back to my old religion. So
Yes.
I really don't know what we're talking about, because we're making offenses of things which are already offenses.
Yes.
Minors, forcing minors to get married, forcing conversion, etc. All that we're really doing is bringing out an enactment whereby we can regulate conversion itself by saying before you convert, the district magistrate will have to approve. Is basically to ensure the demographic profile remains the same and doesn't change. And it does not increase one way or the other. And I think that's fundamentally opposed to the Constitution. What is more, let's not forget that one of the most important parts of our Constitution, as Justice Chinnappa Reddy so beautifully put it in one of the cases, is that religious tolerance runs like a thread through the Constitution of India. We may have added secular by the 42nd Amendment, but secularism was always part of our Constitution. Freedom of conscience always was. So if at any time you find anyone is being forced to convert, he's committed the offense. Same as he's being forced to write a letter or forced to sign something, it's all the same thing. He's being forced to do something, then it's an offense. So what is the need of this legislation unless it's an aim to discourage conversion? Giving discretion to a magistrate to decide whether or not he's going to permit a conversion, which I just cannot understand. Tomorrow, if I want to pray to some other God, if I want to pray to a God who I believe brings faith to me, I don't have to get permission. If I did, I'm sorry. That's the end of any secularism in this country, and I don't think that's ever intended. And it goes against the very basic structure of the Constitution.
Mr. Sundaram, do you believe if this law, one wonders, one assumes it would eventually wind up before a bench, would it pass muster, you think?
As I see it, unless this law can have a reasonable nexus to a legitimate and constitutional cause, it cannot pass muster. But if it has no nexus to a legitimate and constitutional cause, which I am not yet able to see in this enactment, I can't see it passing muster.
Right. If I may just bring in Mr. Sharat Pradhan, because
Yeah.
he is from Uttar Pradesh, we do know that the government has said many times that they have received complaints that young women get in touch with them saying, save us, from this marriage that was only meant to convert us, that parents are always calling saying, save our daughters from this horrible fate of theirs. But is there data, Mr. Pradhan, in any way, has the government been able to present empirical data that this is really a problem? Of course, one would argue that it might, it's not really a thing, but has this government been able to provide any sort of data at all?
Absolutely not, because they don't have that. There isn't data supporting what they are claiming. The idea is not to submit the data. The idea is messaging. First of all, let me congratulate Mr. Sunda. He's explained it so beautifully and so explicitly. I think it says it all. But what I would like to add to that is that the whole idea behind this new enactment, which they are looking up to, is only to do messaging, political messaging. The idea that the UP chief minister has is to, the whole politics is about polarization, religious polarization, by creating a Hindu-Muslim divide. And here they want to paint a picture, an imaginary picture, which doesn't exist on ground, that Muslims are out to convert, out to, entice very, very innocent. According to them, all Hindu girls are very, very innocent. They may be educated or whatever, but this is what they have they have brought down Hindu girls too. For them, all Hindu girls are very innocent, and they can be easily enticed by Muslims who who do not even disclose their religious identity, and the girls are they are ready to go with them and live with them and get married, and they'll learn after a year or so that they have been fooled into this kind of a wedlock, which is absolutely foolish and stupid to believe that this is actually happening. Let me give you an example. Kanpur, which was believed to be the hotspot of this so-called love jihad, as they love to call it, which they have, very, very discreetly, they have not used this expression in the ordinance, because they must have been advised by some sensible lawyers not to do so, and jurists. So, what they did in Kanpur, they a few months back, the Inspector General of Police of Kanpur zone. Kanpur is one of the biggest districts in Uttar Pradesh and a big industrial hub. So the IG constituted a 8-member SIT, Special Investigation Team, to go into all interfaith marriages that took place in the preceding 2 years there. And what were the number of cases there? 14, 1-4 in 2 years, in a place which has a population of almost a crore. They had this problem, which is sounds, according to the ruling party people, this is a huge problem, because they keep on claiming that there are thousands of people converting. So the figure was just 14. And out of those 14, what they discovered, the SIT submitted its report day before yesterday. And the IG police himself, who had appointed this SIT, he held a press conference and declared that only 3 out of those 14 cases of the past 2 years, of the preceding 2 years, were found to fit into this so-called definition of love jihad. And the remaining were there were cases of minors getting into this wedlock. There were cases of but there was no case of the so-called love jihad other than those 3. Now, if this is such a gigantic problem, you can imagine how falsehood is entire. Everything is the narrative. A new narrative is being built on complete falsehood, only to give the impression that this is, then they will say, we solve this problem. Then they will, first they create a narrative. It is only for electoral purposes, by the elections, now that Ayodhya is settled, so they can't use Ayodhya anymore to get votes. Cow they have used enough, and they found that it didn't work so much. So now it is love jihad, which they are hoping will forge a bigger divide between the communities, so that their objective of religious polarization can be served.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Pradhan. Let me bring in Mr. Kailash Vasdev. Mr. Vasdev, good evening. It is called the Uttar Pradesh Vidhi Viruddh Dharma Samparivartan Pratished Adarsh 2020. Effectively, it is a version of Allah.
You read it faster than I could.
So my question to you is this, and I was particularly worried by Mr. Pradhan saying that there was an SIT constituted to look into inter-religious marriages. I made an inter-religious marriage. I don't want the police at my door asking me details about my personal life. And it's a very clear understanding that the law should not enter, the really personal aspects of a citizen's life. This actually gives the police power over individuals, over their personal lives, over their personal choices. Is this a slippery slope, Mr. Vasdev? Or is it likely that, again, we're going to wind up asking the courts to step in?
Good evening. The question is not as complex as the situation is being made out to be. I'm speaking of the legislation. There's been a classic case in this decision in this area in 2009 in the Kerala High Court.
Yeah.
In 2008, there was a huge hue and cry in the state that there was a campus system where people were being converted from one religion to the other. And the girls were being induced from Christians, Muslims, or from Hindus into marriage. It led to a huge fracas in the state, so much so that the chief minister was alleged to be involved in all sorts of things, and eventually proceedings were initiated. The matter came into the High Court in December of 2009, where the persons who were alleged to be involved in this and charged for forced conversions sought anticipatory bail. So the judge wrote a long-drawn order based on the basis of certain observations of a division bench, and didn't grant them anticipatory bail, but he said that, look, I call upon the central government, as also the state government, to give information and details about the kind and the numbers of this situation which is taking place, because the allegation was there were thousands of them. So these gentlemen didn't get anticipatory bail, they took other recourses. But the local police investigated into the matter. They gave a report in 2012. And the report said that there was no truth in the allegations made. There were a few cases of conversions, most voluntary, some forced, but their proceedings were initiated because the damage had been done. In this case, there had been, if I may say, so there had been no sexual intercourse between the people when the offense took place. So the allegations made in the High Court turned out to be a damp squib. Today, the coming up of this particular enactment of this ordinance in the state of Uttar Pradesh is again without debate, without discussion, without going into it, but an autocratic dictate of the cabinet that please enact this law. Now, this law has been enacted without any foundation. Mr. Pradhan just mentioned that there was an investigation of 14 cases. Turned out to be 3 were there, 11 were not. This is the factual premise on which the state has proceeded. But let's look at it further. Aryama is right in saying Hinduism does not have a definition of secularism or anything which is anti-secular. There is no definition of a Hindu in any of the many scriptures which we follow, be it the Manusmriti, be it the ways of life, be it the Veds, be it all sorts of books, all sorts of sages, all sorts of teachings. The Hindu way of life has been best summarized by President Radhakrishnan, a philosopher, writer in his own right, who says Hinduism is a way of life. If Hinduism is a way of life, it accepts and encompasses every religion within its fold. Look at the Indian subcontinent. You have this as a place which has been home to all religions and all castes, which have been, should I say, subject to hostile treatment in their own countries. You form Buddhism and Jainism in a distance of 100 miles of each other. you have the Sikhs, you have the Orthodox Christians, you have the Roman Catholics, you have the Protestants, and they are all over the country. You have the Jews, the northeastern area, Kerala, are known for the Jew populations. The Parsis, they left Iran and came and settled in India because this was a safe place for them to propagate their religion. So no religion which has come to India or professed itself to be a part of this country has ever been singled out for treatment, which is anything but secular. Yes, there have been instances in the 1400s when the first onslaughts came into Goa. Subsequently, you had the situations with the Mughal kings who wanted everything to go into their direction. But eventually, all of them came into this melting pot called India, that is Bharat, that is Hindustan. Traditionally, it was Hindustan, but in Hindustan, you had every known religion. Coming to the law, the Constitution does not say you cannot convert. It says you can follow any religion of your choice under Article 19. And in the constitutional scheme, there are special protections given to all religious denominations, including the minorities, as also the backward class people, which include the tribals. The tribals have a unique way of life.
Forgive me, Mr. Vasdev, there are anti-conversion laws in our country.
I'm coming to that in a minute. I'm giving you the background of the laws. The anti-conversion laws are in specific acts, the Hindu Marriage Act. If you convert after marriage to another religion to get married, your marriage gets voided. If it turns out you've played a fraud and not disclosed your religious background, your marriage is void. So you have provisions in law which say that when you take these kind of recourses, by concealing your religion and getting married, it's a fraud. So that marriage goes. So there are enough existing laws under the Indian Penal Code. Getting married to a minor, causing the death of a child in the womb, or playing a fraud. There are so many elements which go to the masterpiece of a document that they take care of this situation. You have today met the magistrate, a person who's going to decide your future. If he says no, what happens?
Yes.
You can't get married. I mean, the couple has been going around, they've met, they want to get married, whether it is in the social media or in personal media, or in the colleges or in the schools, and they've been growing up together. Can you stop them from getting married? You need a magistrate's permission. Look at the flip side. To get the magistrate's permission, which is very common in our country, you may have to pay a price. So you're going to encourage corruption. Now, the purpose of this...
But will you call it, Kailash, a conversion tax?
I would.
Underhand.
I was going to come to that.
No, but you know, I expect, gentlemen, that the tax would actually be in the opposite direction. Parents who don't want their daughters to marry someone not of their choice will be paying the tax to the district magistrate.
It will be abusive. It will be an abuse of the system. You will bring about something which every government announces: we will eliminate corruption. We will streamline the process. We will have a one window system. Here you're going to open up God knows how many windows, I don't know. This is the
single window marriage permission. But okay, so Mr. Vasdev, let me just open and we have Geeta Luthra join us right now. Ms. Luthra, you were with us about a week ago when we discussed the same matter, and you did say none of this actually makes sense. But now we have a cabinet that has readied an ordinance. Remember, not even it hasn't passed in the assembly.
I just wanted to say one thing.
Yes.
UP is the only state which has been able to drop an ordinance. The other states are fighting to get it done. They're not finding their roots. Madhya Pradesh is trying. Other states are trying.
4 states have already. 4 states have already proposed this.
They proposed this,
and Yogi Adityanath wanted to be, in his game of manship. He decided to go ahead
because the purpose of the whole thing is to cover up those issues which are relevant and not disclose them. The economic meltdown, the pandemic, the effects of that.
Mr. Vasdev, I just want to bring in Ms. Geeta Luthra because I understand that her internet connection is a little unstable. So let's try and speak to her very quickly before we lose her again. Ms. Luthra, for whatever the motive may be behind doing something like this, my worry here is that it outlaws families. There will be thousands of families across Uttar Pradesh and across the rest of the country which are interreligious. society will start to look at these families differently. The police will start to look at these families differently. Their children will start to be treated differently in school and the playground. What legal recourse is there for this right now? Because it does seem like this is going through.
I know I'm very surprised that it will go through, if it goes through. And it can't really stand the test or the scrutiny of the court, to my mind. But then we can't say, we see that unusual things happen and they pass muster. How can it pass muster is what I'm trying to think to myself. So clearly, if it's addressing that 0.002% of cases where someone's being forced to conversion for reasons where it's a duress, I need legislation in place. Now, if it is not for that, is it just to give a kind of, it's like a public relations exercise? I'm wondering, what is this exercise about? Clearly, it's not about that one Kerala case or one odd Uttar Pradesh case. You don't have legislation. And what bothers me is that it is this very government and previous governments that have gone against Khap Panchayats, have said that they will protect marriages, whether they are intercaste, interreligious, or marriages where the parents, because of difference in economic structure, difference in outlook, difference in capability, the parents would be opposed, or the society would be opposed to permitting such a move through. So you had Khap Panchayats. Khap Panchayats themselves profess that your neighbor is your brother, and if you are in the same village, then you can't be marrying each other. But having said that, the courts have come down so heavily on this, and the state has been supportive about it. So I don't know where this is coming from, because this will be in the face of whatever the courts have been saying so far, and whatever government's been saying so far. So it's not, I can't understand the rationale, and I feel it will be difficult to pass muster.
Thank you, Ms. Luthra.
It will only lead to parents
harassing. Yes. Parents harassing, kids who want to get married, or young people who want to get married.
Absolutely.
And let's acknowledge the fact that invariably inter-religious marriages happen against the will or the blessings of parents. They're invariably elopes, couples who elope, who have interreligious marriages, and this is just going to make their life that much more complicated. Remember, Madhya Pradesh suggested that those people who help them will also be, looked at by the law, which means those two people, those two friends who show up to sign as witnesses in the registrar's office will also get into trouble. Mr. Sundaram, yes,
so this is like Sati. I think let's equate it.
As far as parents are concerned, Faye, even in Uttar Pradesh, out of these 14 cases that I cited, 6 were of complaints by parents, and they could not stand scrutiny of the law, and because in each case the girls went to court and insisted that we had decided to get married out of our own accord, and despite and the parents were opposing at some level, eventually they got reprieve from the court. So, interestingly, yesterday only, the High Court, Allahabad High Court, has issued an order striking down the earlier single bench order. The division bench has struck down the single bench order, or which the Yogi Adityanath government has taken recourse to, that the court has said that for purposes of marriage, you cannot convert.
Yes.
So that has
In fact,
also been struck down.
That was going to be my next question to Mr. Sundaram. Mr. Sundaram, the Supreme Court, now I'm going to go back to the Hadia case that came out of Kerala, where the NIA got involved and the whole government was suddenly very interested in how this one young woman decided on her own how she wanted to live her life.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
shocking that a woman had had a thought in our country. Everyone was very shocked. The Supreme Court said very clearly that the freedom to choose one's religion is one's choice. And life partner is also one's choice, and it hits at the heart of Indian plurality that such a thing would have even come up. Also, like Mr. Pradhan noted, were what the Allahabad High Court has just said yesterday. Isn't it important, or shouldn't state governments in some way pay attention to what the courts are saying? One, and secondly, the use of the ordinance route for something like this. Ordinances, in my understanding, have to be used in case of emergency, but the state cannot wait until the next assembly session. So is it valid for them to use the ordinance route for this in this case?
Let me answer both your questions, but can I answer the second first? Because,
Yes.
it's a very simple issue. The ordinance route, as you say, is meant to be taken when the assembly is not
Is
sitting.
not in session.
And when they're not in session, at that time, you need a certain legislation to go through. And it is timely that it goes through at that time. It is required to be done without waiting for the legislature to sit, to get back into session. Now, that is the norm. Let me assure you, this norm is more commonly seen in its departure, because all governments find it very easy to pass an ordinance rather than place it before the legislature and then try to pass it knowing that the legislature is going to have a lot of debating. It's going to take a lot of time. Then the voting has to take place. So very often the ordinance route is chosen. Why? Because all that an ordinance says is that you can pass the ordinance which will have the same weight, because it is legislative. It is not executive. It is legislative. It have the same weight. And within 6 months, the legislature must enact it into a law, or else the ordinance would lapse. Now, what you've done in effect is brought in the law without debate, brought in the law without voting, without having the opposition to say anything. And then it continues, and you have 6 months to try to convince the opposition or bring your party numbers to sufficient numbers to be able to vote it in. So this ordinance route, as much as we may frown on it, is something which is often taken recourse to, and unfortunately our constitution permits it. And I have never seen any case where the court has actually interfered and struck down an ordinance saying, well, in our view, the ordinance could have waited, it could have waited for the legislature. You might say that as a pious statement, but never with any effective result, because to do so, I believe, would be the court interfering and stepping into the realm of the legislature. It cannot be done. And unless the constitution is amended, I think this route can always be taken. With regard to your other question about the various pronouncements of the courts, beautiful statements. Like I said, I quoted Chinnappa Reddy as saying religious tolerance is like a threat to the constitution. You'll find many judgments where you have all this being said. And let me say that all that are being said are truisms. They're absolute truisms. Where is there a doubt that there is freedom of religion in India? The constitution says so. It's not that the court which is saying so. To say that a person has freedom of choice as to their spouse, where does the court need to say so? It is there inbuilt in your right under the Constitution of India. So all these, the court is just repeating what is already there in the Constitution. Now, if any government is willing to violate the Constitution, knowing that the Constitution says so, they're not really violating the Constitution, the court order. They're violating the Constitution itself. I'm quite willing to do it and saying, we've made a message, we've brought our message out, we've told the people what we think. It is going to influence a lot of people to voting with us. It's going to get us a lot of popular will. And tomorrow, if the court strikes it down, so let it. We'll say we did our best, but what can we do? This court came and struck it down. So it's a pure political move. It is nothing else. And let me tell you one more thing here. Let's understand this very clearly. When you talk about parents, many parents, and especially more conservative parents, certainly be against an interreligious marriage amongst their children. So think of all of them. We're ignoring that. Think of the number of people who will be supporting such an ordinance.
Yes.
Just think of that. We seem to forget while we sit and we discuss this, because we are people who believe that we are not conservative, who believe that we are more liberal in our thinking. Don't forget that whether we like to accept it or not, the majority of Indians could very possibly be conservative. The majority of Americans chose Donald Trump. I mean, look at it. So when you look at it that way, for those parents, now they have another handle to ensure that their child does not get into an inter-religious marriage. Because as you know, 9 out of 10 parents would object severely to a inter-religious marriage. Amongst the middle classes, definitely. It's only amongst the rich, the super rich, where you get into, you're used to your children going and studying abroad and then coming back with a bride of the country which they were studying in or something like that. But it doesn't happen amongst the middle class. And the middle class is called the middle class because it's a vast, vast, vast majority of the people, and amongst the lower economic strata. So according to me, there's going to be a lot of support for this from parents, because those parents are going to say, oh, good, now we've got another way to ensure that our child doesn't embarrass our whole family and our khandan and our traditions and whatever else by going and marrying somebody who's in a different religion. So you're going to find a lot of support for it. And to that extent, if the duty of a political party is to somehow see themselves coming into political power, which is basically the basic function of a political party, is to gain political power. If you look at it that way, then they've come out with the legislation which may actually increase their popularity, while not passing the muster of law or the constitution. It's not every provision of the constitution that's popular, let me assure you. The constitution doesn't have to be a popular document. It's our Bible, so far as we are concerned, by which we live. And that is different as a country. But I think you're going to have a lot of people are supporting this. And tomorrow, if the court strike it down, the government will say, look, we did our best for you, but what could we do? Court struck it down.
Absolutely. Mr. Sundaram, I do know that you have to rush off, so thank you for spending time with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Answering those questions. We have a couple of legal questions coming in from our audience. I also want to understand, from anyone on the panel, let's assume a couple does elope, they run off to a different state that doesn't have this sort of anti-conversion into marriage coercion, women are not really capable of making decisions type of law. If they, let's say, run off to Kerala to get married, can the Uttar Pradesh police chase them down into Kerala and still make those arrests? Is that possible? Ms. Luthra? I don't know if we have that connection. Mr. Vasdev?
Yes. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yes, of course they can. And of course this would happen because the offense probably happened in UP. Now, if they run away, get married and convert in Madhya Pradesh, for example, then it could be an arguable case that the offense happened in Madhya Pradesh where it's not an offense. But otherwise, if they run off and take shelter and the actual act happens in UP, then surely one state can then go after the accused, even if they are in this part of India.
The act in question is the conversion, not the falling in love. I'm sure Mr. Vasdev has done many such matters. I have done many such matters in the Supreme Court and in the Delhi High Court. And in the Supreme Court, interestingly, somebody running away from UP, getting married, they came to Delhi because they thought Delhi would be a safer haven. 9 or 10 members of the family, the brother's brother, the brother's brother's sister, every possible person was persecuted. I remember Justice Kabir's bench and Justice Silveshwar there. And the first thing they gave us was protection. And numerous such cases. When you're for the government, you're against the government, you're for the private person. And what happens in such cases is that you need that little window. Parents need that little window
to get the girl into their control. And then the girl, sometimes out of pressure or duress, is made to change her statement. So these are the aspects of fear that may come. That even if they want to do it willingly, even if they are converting or not converting, that's not the issue. You could term it as a conversion in order to persecute them, because the parents really need to, one or the other parent would be against the marriage, if not both. And so they need to get their hands on those that young couple. That's the whole game, and that is where the law could be misused.
Mr. Vasdev, do you agree that this, you did say, of course, this law is going to be misused a lot? We have a couple of questions from our audience. Wow, there are a lot of questions from our audience. Is this a manner, is this a way to just create a hypothetical enemy, which is a threat to the majority? How is this not an encroachment of personal liberty, says Bharat Rawal, in the eyes of the Supreme Court? Why is there no suo motu action taken against this? I think that, invariably citizens are now pinning their sort of hopes that the courts will step in, which is really an unfair thing to expect from the courts, isn't it?
See, the courts can't go and remedy every error. You can remedy an error when it comes before the court. I was toying over this ordinance and its impacts in a different way. Apart from the fact that they will play havoc into the children. As you rightly pointed out, there'll be trouble within the families. There'll be all sorts of pressures. And look, I told you so. But one aspect which is very troublesome, which Mr. Pradhan might be more acquainted with in UP, honor killings.
Yeah.
In one sense, this kind of an ordinance would support honor killings because it has happened beyond your religious tenets. And as of today, every now and then you hear that children, young couples have been eliminated by the respective families. You hear of them in Noida, you hear of them in
Western UP.
All over Western UP. It's a regular feature. Meerut, Muzaffarnagar, Ghaziabad. Oh, I don't know, all over the place.
Meerut,
yes, Meerut recently, not very far back, 3-4 weeks. So you see, this is an element which is disturbing me more. You have said that interreligious marriage by force are not permitted. But what about interreligious marriages which take place with or without force? I should say without force. Does it become a love jealousy? Because two young people have fallen in love. Are you jealous of them falling in love? I don't want to use the expression which is there today. What is wrong with it? If there is a forced marriage, if there's a forced conversion, if it's the case of a minor, you have the right to take action under the Indian Penal Code by anyone. Here, the state is going to be filing the complaint against them. Who's going to answer that? You do not specify who's going to file the complaint. The couple is very happy. So when the magistrate says this is about filing a complaint, that couple is ruined for life. They will be spending time in court seeking bail, getting into a circumstance which will take away the best years of their life. Is it fair on them? Forget the constitutional aspects. I'm on the human rights issue.
Yes.
You are going to encourage a particular course of action. For example, let's take a person. There's Mr. X and Ms. Y working in a particular office. The boss doesn't like the relationship. They decide to announce one day that, look, we're going to get married. Either we're going to get married in the church, or we're going to get married in the temple, or we're going to get married in a gurdwara, or we're going to get married in a mosque, whatever place of religious thing. The boss says, Acha, you're going to leave my services? I'll teach you a lesson. He invokes this ordinance. You've ruined the children. You've ruined a young couple's life. Do you have that power? Where does it come from? Just because you're autocratic. See, there are fallouts of this which are very dangerous. And we don't seem to be realizing this. Political gain, yes, please gain as much as you can politically. But the hustings we've shown in our country after 5 years change the complexion. But the law is there to cause damage. And in our judicial system, Today, God knows which way it will swing. In the Allahabad case, the first judgment was opposed to this. Now the division bench has reversed the decision. But as long as the single judge's judgment was prevailing, and before the judgment came day before yesterday by the division bench, which makes a very beautiful observation. Mr. Pradhan, just read out that portion where he says in the last 3 paragraphs about the conversion aspect and religious rites and practices. So beautifully written paragraphs. But as I said, you have caused the damage.
Yeah.
Litigation is time consuming.
So I have a quick question here for anyone on the panel who wants to tackle this. Like I said, there are 3 parts to this law. Part 1 is if there is a conversion that takes place that's forced or through conversion or coercion. Part 2 is if the girl in question is a minor, or if the woman in question is scheduled caste or scheduled tribe. Now, I don't understand. Is the UP government, for some reason, under the impression that women of the Dalit women are even less capable than Savarna women for choosing their own life partners? Why is there a special category being made for women from the scheduled caste, the Dalit women? I don't understand. It's offensive.
I think the whole idea behind this, because the whole thing is being done with a political objective. This is only again messaging to the scheduled caste that look here, we are bothered about you also. So that, you know, they have been trying to dig into the Mayawati's vote bank of Dalits. And this is one way of making further penetration into the Dalit vote bank. Simple as that. It is the whole idea, you know, the whole thing is designed largely for this electoral politics. So, you know, you can't look into the other logic behind it, because there is no logic. They know it full well. The whole objective and the manner in which it was done yesterday, the cabinet was aware that the court order had already come, and then they decided to do it. They wanted to, and that was the tearing hurry for them to bring it on the agenda and go ahead with it. 2 reasons. One, he wanted that he should the chief minister of UP should be ahead of all 4 other states, which is Haryana, Karnataka, Assam, and Madhya Pradesh. So he wanted to be one up on them. That was one reason. The second was, well, the court has come today. We'll go ahead with this. Let's see what the court. You know, it is amounting to a kind of defiance of the courts. Then on one hand, they keep saying that we have a lot of respect for the judiciary, but this is what anybody, by going by simple logic and the established norms, do you think it was advisable for any government to be taking up when the court has already struck down the order that on which you are hoping to build this whole narrative?
Sorry, forgive me, that was my dog. She gets upset around this time every day when people ring the doorbell. But
even your dog is reacting to this.
But so Tanvi D has written saying, why don't we have someone from the Muslim community on this panel, because this is an outright attack against them. See, I don't want to place someone from the community on the panel to sort of plead their case. This is not an outright attack on one community. This is an outright attack on the Constitution. This is an outright attack on fundamental rights. And for heaven's sake, it's an outright attack on every single woman in this country. We are being told effectively that we are no better than goats, that
Absolutely.
we cannot process a thought.
And
it would be an insult.
Yes. It would be an insult on anyone who stands for what is right to say that you need a Muslim person to defend themselves. I mean, defend this. You know, everybody is speaking out that the reasons are what Mr. Pradhan has said. I mean, that's very clearly the reason. So if that's the reason and it's not going to pass muster, then whatever little mileage they can get. But surely everybody with one voice will say that, you know, this is not fair.
Absolutely. And, you know, just to clarify to my audience, and I do want to take a minute to do that, we've got three senior advocates of the Supreme Court
Yeah.
who argue constitutional matters before benches. We're looking at this purely from the point of view of the law, from fundamental rights, and what our constitution tells us. We've got a very senior journalist who understands the motives of the UP government, every government that has come before it. So we're looking at it from that point of view, what the motives could have possibly been. We're not going to sit here and ask someone from the Muslim community to justify themselves in any way. That is not fair. We as citizens need to apply our mind, understand the law, and decide for ourselves whether or not this is right, simply from understanding the issue and the constitution. We don't want anyone to come here and plead. It's not fair. It's not right. That is why this panel is structured the way it is. Ms. Luthra, I do want to, let's actually for a second play devil's advocate. Okay. And let me ask you this. In Uttar Pradesh, it is true that crime against women is atrocious. They have brought in a question of what happens if the girl is a minor, and weddings of minors are anyways against the law in our country. But is there a need for governments like Uttar Pradesh to form laws that protect women?
So I think there are already enough laws to protect women. It's the implementation, it's the mindset that we need. We have POCSO, we have the Indian Penal Code. In fact, the other day, someone was telling me that I should sign a petition which they were promoting, saying that the age of majority should be reduced to 16 because there are so people maturing at a younger age. So that's what needs to be studied, and what needs to be implemented is the law which is in place. I think India is the one country that perhaps has 43 gender sensitive. I don't think in any part of the world will you have so many favor of women, not gender neutral. Question is, how do you protect them? Is education, more education and more education.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So well said. For everyone who argues about protecting women, please, let me just say this once and for all. We are not your daughters. We are not your sisters. We are not your mothers. We don't need protection. We're equal citizens of equal rights in this country. We need safety. Safety and protection are completely different things. What is safety? We need to be able to walk down the street without being harassed. We need to be able to work long hours into the night if that is our choice. We need to be able to study in any part of this country if that is our choice. We need to be able to marry whoever we want. We need to be able to have babies, not have babies, have agency over our own bodies. That is safety, to be able to live as a full citizen without fear. We are not goats, and I'm not saying cattle because that gets me into trouble. We are not goats. We don't have owners. We don't have custodians. We don't need to be protected. We don't need to be locked up. We don't need to be fed and looked after. Those days are gone, and these laws are last attempts to grasp and pull back those days. And that is unfortunately where we are today. A horrible state of affairs where, political gain is being used, but what we're doing instead is damaging people's lives. Mr. Pradhan, I'll give you that last word. In this race, and now that Uttar Pradesh has done it, all of these other 5 states are going to find a way to do it as well. There will be a time gap before this winds up before a court. In the meantime, what kind of damage is likely to be done?
Well, you will have more such cases where they will, in order to justify what they are trying to do, I'm sure they'll pick up any interfaith marriage. Thankfully, I think Mr. Yogi Adityanath will spare 2 prominent BJP leaders, Shahnawaz Hussain and Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi, both who married Hindu women. And I hope he doesn't want to invoke that law against them too, because I wouldn't be surprised. So if they belong to another party, he probably would have done it. So, the tragedy is, I'll tell you, there's a reverse case. The case which has come up in Lucknow, there was a girl, a Muslim girl, just give me 2 minutes. a young Muslim girl who fell in love with a Hindu boy, and she married him, and the fellow forced him to get converted to Hinduism. And she changed, her name was Rukaiya, and then she became Muskan Arya. She was married in an Arya Samaj, which is a legally valid marriage. And after a month, the family, this boy threw her out, and this poor girl is running from pillar to post, not able to even get a FIR lodged. This is the attitude of the police under a government whose the whole idea behind such laws is known to everybody. So that is how they behave. She has still not been able to get her FIR lodged. She's gone to court to get a case registered, and the poor, must be a barely 25, 26-year-old girl. And nothing is, and they all, I asked the BJP people, what do you, yes, that is also love jihad, we will do something about it, but nothing is being done. Because they all know the mindset, and the police will not go against the mindset of the highest political boss. The whole objective,
So I have one last
that blatant,
quick
it is that blatant.
Quick question for Mr. Kailash Vasdev. Mr. Vasdev, if, we have the Special Marriage Act in our country that is designed specifically for these cases where people of two separate religions or two separate communities, where their rituals and their customs don't match, they want to get married. The Special Marriage Act is designed and welcomes these couples themselves. And I know that there are people who complain about the fact that because the Special Marriage Act sends notices to the parents' house and informs parents in some way that this marriage is happening, it does put some couples under risk. But doesn't this law, in theory, fly in the face of the Special Marriage Act? How do we reconcile these two things?
It does. It is totally opposed to the Special Marriage Act. More importantly, you see in the Special Marriage Act in certain proceedings, courts have also observed that public notices should not be given. The Act provides that 30 days public notice has to be given and a notice is to be put up outside the court board. That leads to a certain amount of blackmailing and also for the purposes of this putting fear of things into people. You see, this particular UP ordinance militates against every known legal system prevailing in our country. In the constitutional scheme, you have the 6th schedule, a very remarkable part of our constitution. The 6th schedule is a special schedule for the purposes which are notified to be tribal or back areas. For example, the Karbi Anglongs, the Khasi Hills, the Garo Hills, the Jaintia Hills, there are so many I can name. The 5th schedule says backward areas, which protects the tribals in those areas. This kind of an act is now going to have a lot of difficulty in passing muster on the test of the 5th and 6th schedules. What we are doing is the independence given by the Constitution to these many countries, as I call them, the 5th and 6th schedule areas, where they have their own right of elections, where they're only answerable to the governor, not even to the elected representatives of the state. You are going to play into an area which has been secular in its own self, recognized by the Constitution. That is one aspect. On the test of the Constitution, this kind of a situation militates against the right to religion, the fundamental right to exist as you want. It militates against the Special Marriage Act. It militates against the Hindu Marriage Act. It militates against so many marriage acts which prevail to protect communities. The reason for these acts, Mr. Pradhan is right, is to defeat a judgment. But what you're defeating is defeating children in what they want to do for the future of a country, which to them is still very bright. We are being retrograde, we are being autocratic, and worse still, we are trying to bring about a situation which the framers of this constitution did not create. They wanted to get rid of reservations. They wanted a secular country. They wanted development on all fronts, and reservations stopped in 50 years. We are now carrying it down into a very different area where we are discriminating between religions for the purposes of political gain. If this goes on, I don't see any single window which is going to say, Make in India will succeed. We will make out of India and unfortunately pay a price with the future generations, because we are past it. We are the graveyard shifts. We are 60 plus. I mean, much more than that. But these youngsters, which constitute 55% of our population, you should not impose such restrictions when they have the opportunity to grow. Think of the pandemic. Think of ways to sort those things out. Don't stifle youngsters. They are a marvelous lot of people.
Well, we're going to leave it. I want to thank my panelists for spending time with us this evening and answering our questions. Thank our audience as well. Remember, we'll be back again. There are a couple of things brewing in our country. Farmers that are protesting in, remember, Yogendra Yadav told us that there was a large protest of farmers organized for today. In Haryana, they have been hit with water cannons in the biting winter. Which seems like a fairly cruel thing to do. Also, they're not being allowed to enter Delhi. We are going to do a discussion on what's happening with the farmers tomorrow. I do hope that a lot of you will come in and take part in it simply to understand farmer issues. Not enough of us in urban India understand farmer issues. Also, take a look at what's happening in Uttarakhand, where the chief minister has just denotified an elephant reserve forest in order to bring in what he calls development. That's also something we should pay closer attention to, because remember, the forests actually belong to the elephant, but it can't argue its case in court. So we have to pay closer attention on the elephant's behalf. Thank you all for watching. Good night.